Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the second webinar that I'm doing for Pure Insight, this time called Creative Thinking Styles, People, Places, and Possibilities Through Processes. Primary focus this time is on tools and why tools work specifically better for some people than others, and how can we as meeting leaders or facilitators of idea-generating sessions can capitalize on the fact that we all think differently. So let's talk about two of the specific general thing issues related to this program. G.A.P.S and S.P.R.E.A.D. Several years ago when I first got involved with creativity through the Creative Problem Solving Institute, when I discovered and became aware that there were things called creative thinking tools, I also became aware of what I was labeling creative gaps. Four primary reasons why most people are not as creative as they were born to be, or at least born with the capacity to be. And I use the acronym in English of G.A.P.S, the English word, and then use it to represent four primary things. G stands for gift. So many of us in all the cultures around the world, when we think about being creative or asked, are we creative, think that it's a gift that only a few people have. Certain artists, certain writers, poets, musicians, sculptors, and so forth, the fields that we normally think of as the creative fields, when in reality all aspects of human life involve creative ideas and creative solutions, from waking up in the morning to going to sleep at night. So first of all, we accept that the idea of gift is a myth, that everyone is born with vast capacities to be creative. Unfortunately, most of our cultures tend not to favor most of them in order to form just that, conform, to create a sense of conformity, a unity to that particular culture. My major professor, my longtime friend, Paul Torrance, who was an extensive researcher in the areas of creative thinking, did studies with young children and discovered by the fourth year in school, or the fourth grade in the American system, most of the recognizable creative abilities or traits that were noticeable when they first entered school at the age of 5 appeared to be missing or not being used. He referred to it as the fourth grade slump. It could amount to almost 80% of what was shown when they were 5 did not seem to appear when they were 9 years old. By the time they became 16 or in the 10th grade, 10th level, it had dropped to less than 10%. But also in my own career over the last 30 years, I've discovered through workshops, listening to tapes, reading books, listening to a lecture, we can become aware of the fact that we've let many of our gifts be silent or asleep for many years. And with practice and awakening and recognizing them, we can re-spark them and increase our creativeness once again. The second one from the letter A is attitude. In the greatest percentage of the time for human beings, creativeness becomes more natural when we have a positive attitude, even on up to a very enthusiastic, idealistic, inspired attitude. Though it is true that some people at times, in fits of depression, can be creative. Several artists have created some of their greatest works when they were depressed. But the idea of having people try to be creative when they're depressed, or the idea of a manager or leader or team manager depressing their employees or having an environment that's depressive, is a tremendous mistake. The third is processes. Everything that a human being does is the result of a process. They may range from highly conscious processes, such as we are taught in school in the various subjects, meaning techniques or formulas or systems that we're taught. They could be very subjective, very subconscious processes that we're not even aware that we do it. I think of an example when many artists challenge me, and when I make that statement and say, no, I don't have a process, I just paint. I paint when the muse lets me to, allows me to paint. And I thought, well, if that's what you believe, but that's still somewhat of a process. But I think back to artists like Henry Moore, the famous sculptor, who his process was to wake up in the morning, had a particular routine of drinking 8, 9 cups of coffee, then he would walk in his garden until his mood set. He was forcing it. He had a process, a way of doing things. And we're going to cover that specific area this time in this webinar. The last one, the S, stands for strategies. In other words, you choose to be creative. You choose to use unusual, unique ways of approaching things or of thinking. So today we're going to cover, next, is how do you as a manager, a leader, a team coordinator, or simply someone who is facilitating a meeting, how do you help bring out more creativity? Well, here are at least 6 things I've noticed over the last 30 years that I've discovered in bits and pieces in major corporations down to small companies. The unfortunate part is that no single company that I've come across has a very systematic approach or is very uniform at doing this throughout their entire companies, which is the focus of the work that I do now. So let's look at these 6 general categories of how we can help ourselves and others become more creative. First of all, obviously, is supporting it. Being complimentary about people, asking them for ideas, giving them positive feedback for ideas, even when they don't look like solutions. They may look strange, they may look unusual, they may look like they can't possibly work. But the unique thing is, most of the things that we take for granted today were unusual, weird, or strange when they first were thought of. We also need to promote it, and many companies do this. I've seen it from the IBMs to the Kimberly-Clarks of the American-type companies to other companies in Denmark, where I've had the opportunity to be, in Asia, in South America, in Africa. They have promotion campaigns, brochures, posters, radio shows, special newsletters promoting the idea of creativity and, for the last 10 to 12 years, innovation. These are good, but unfortunately they come and go, and they usually are not very uniform for any length of time. Third category is to recognize and reward. Now, there are debates about this among some psychologists who have studied creativity in the workplace. Having been someone who has been a creative person in several workplaces in my life, in 8 different fields, and as a psychologist and consultant over the last 25 years, is yes, the highly creative people are not necessarily motivated by external things, but at the same time, they still like to be rewarded occasionally. It could be money, it could be time, it simply could be a new office, some new equipment, it could be a variety of things. But the key thing is that they are recognized and occasionally rewarded in the ways that suit them. They also need to be encouraging it, to asking people for ideas, to thanking them for the ideas they have, to suggesting that they work harder on them and keep trying. Things such as the Post-it notes that took 13 years to go from the first concept of S.P.R.E.A.D to some of the ideas that got tied to it to make it into a product, to it finally was rolled out as a product and now generates hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue for the 3M Corporation. A product that might be looked at as having been the result of 4 dumb ideas. Fifth category is applying it. Actually having everyone in an organization, from the front door to the top floor or the back door to the top floor, being asked to be creative at least part of the time. Referring back to 3M, their general principle or philosophy in the company since the 1940s under their CEO named Terry McKnight was to spend up to 15% of your time doing things that would lead towards the creation of a new product or a better process or a way of improving things. One requirement, though, was you had to get your normal job done in 85% of the time. So one of the rewards you were given was the right to be more creative and to have some chances to explore and experiment, quote, have fun, trying something new, but you had to earn that reward by being more efficient and more productive. And last is actually developing it. Having workshops, having seminars, having training programs, having perhaps training or creative thinking resource rooms, which several companies have tried, with books and tapes and movies available that people could, on their own time during their work week, go and spend an hour or so working on developing creative thinking or learning creative thinking tools like we're dealing with in this session. Creative thinking tools, there are hundreds and hundreds of them that have been developed over the years. When I first got involved, there were a handful of books that you could look through, it seemed, back in the 70s. In reality, there were probably hundreds, but I was only aware of a few, like Alex Osborne, Paul Torrance's books, Morris Stein's books, and a few others. But now you can go on the web and write in creative thinking tools, and you'll find probably several hundred websites. The image in the back of this screen is from one of those pages in England from Andy Burnett. It has explanations and, in a few cases, demonstrations of literally hundreds of different kinds of tools from A to Z. And there are many others. On my own website, I have similar things. Creative thinking tools. What we're going to do over the next 40-some minutes is where, when, why, who, what, and how, the basic 6 questions dealing with that specific topic. S.T.A.M.P.S is one way I developed years ago, a system to catalog